Okay, guys, so welcome everyone. I'm so happy to see all of you. Before we start with the guided meditation and the webinar, I just want to tell you that this webinar has been organized by the Weekly Fasting Group, which is a big international WhatsApp group of individuals who practice fasting once a week, who abstain from food for once a week for 24 hours. We have people virtually from all over the world, and some people do it for spiritual reasons, others do it for health reasons, just for reason of knowing themselves better. And in between, we also have a chat where we discuss different subjects related to healing, cleansing, spirituality. We have a WhatsApp chat, but we also have those webinars where we invite interesting speakers who can share their wisdom in relation to healing, in relation to life wisdom in general, in relation to energies, in relation to spiritual growth, whatever. Like we did absolutely different. This group does not have any agenda. We are really open-minded. We welcome everyone. If a person who has real experience of life, welcome everyone. We do not judge people here. We do not impose our choices on anyone in relation to dietary choices or spiritual choices or whatever. We are here to learn and to develop, and that is the purpose of this group. And today we have my dear friend Arthur Burton from Florida, and he deals with lots of very interesting subjects in those fields of healing, spirituality, meditation, spiritual growth, etc. So today we are going to discuss the problem of cravings and how to apply certain techniques of original 12 steps. I don't know much about this subject, so you're going to enlighten us. But before that, we are going to have a short guided meditation with Arthur. So, guys, you are welcome to mute yourself. Yeah, let's just start. Arthur, over to you. But you're muted, Arthur. You're muted. You have to unmute yourself.
I was muted.
Yeah, you were muted. Yeah, yeah.
Hi, everyone. Honored and excited to be here. I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment, but let's take a moment and tune in and drop in. So meditation's very personal. I'm going to offer some suggestions. Feel free to follow along or ignore them and do your own form of centering, grounding meditation. So I invite you to take a few deep breaths. You can even let out a sound if you like letting go of everything that's happened today and letting go of our ideas of what we think is going to happen, maybe even later on today, maybe even during this webinar. And that goes for me too. I have a rough plan, or I have some ideas, but for right now, I'm just going to let them go and come into the now. And now, please imagine that it's high noon and the sun is shining down. It's right overhead, but it's not hot, but you can feel that the warmth of it on the front of your body, on the top of your head. And just open and take that warmth in, that goodness, that light. Let yourself be filled up with it. And then imagine from the center of the earth, there's a geyser rising up, but it's not a geyser of water. It's a geyser of energy, effervescent, beautiful energy, bubbling up from the center of the earth. Maybe you feel it on the bottoms of your feet or the back of your body. Please open and let that in. Let yourself be filled up, recharged, cleansed. So there's different people here with different beliefs. So if you do have a belief in higher power or God, by whatever name you call it, I invite you to the possibility that we're not just taking in life energy, but we're taking in divine energy that can bring peace to the heart, give us vitality for living, that can also guide us through life. So taking in this goodness, you can even breathe it in. Imagine filling yourself up on the inhale and then releasing what's not needed on the exhale. And just reflect on, for a moment, please, on this idea of inspired yet grounded. We started with the sun, which is up in the sky and vast. And the next thing we came to is the earth below us. Maybe you feel your feet on the ground. And that's going to be a little bit of the theme of the talk today. Grounded inspiration. It's also a beautiful way to live. There's an expression, head in the sky and feet on the ground, or something along those lines of being very practical and grounded, yet having a vast, expansive, open vision, an inspired vision. So thank you so much for your practice. Of course, you're welcome to continue meditating. You'll probably see me every now and then close my eyes. You're welcome to just listen, continue to take in good energy. And, or if you'd like, you can open your eyes.
Thank you so much, Arthur. It was wonderful.
Mm.
And I really, really liked it when you said that it's divine energy, not just life energy, but divine energy. It brought to it, for me, it brought to it special taste, like special special taste when it's divine, when it comes from God. Yeah, absolutely.
Beautiful.
Okay, and meanwhile we had few new people who joined us, so welcome everyone. And yes, Arthur, so before we delve into this very, very interesting subject, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you started to think out of the box. Like, how did you come into this path beyond what just normal society teaches,
Wow, thank you. What a beautiful invitation. And once again, welcome to everyone who just joined in. Welcome to everybody. I will take your question. First, though, I have to say I'm really excited for this topic today.
Me too.
And there's a smidgen of nervousness because I've talked about the 12 steps before. This is the first time, and this is a dream come true, sharing it with a non-12 step audience. I've talked a lot about this process and this path to people who are already in it. So there's all this excitement to be sharing it with people who some people maybe never even heard of the 12 steps, but don't know what they are. But there's a little smidgen of nervousness. So like dream come true and like, ooh, new territory. So thank you so much for the invite.
Absolutely. Yeah. I guess we will have to really start from the basics because not many people, including myself, beyond the name, I haven't heard much about this 12-step program.
Good. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's my plan. And I love your question of like, how did I start to think outside the box? And when I was a teenager, I was at computer camp. I was a super nerd. I still kind of am. Um, now I can love the fact that I'm kind of a nerd. Um, and at camp, there was a guy who practiced hypnosis, and he literally hypnotized someone and had this person do all this crazy, weird stuff. While the person was under, including one thing where you had the person be stiff as a board and
Wow.
in between two beds, and then someone sat on the person and they didn't budge. And that made an impression on me. Um, so I bought some books on hypnosis and I actually learned how to hypnotize myself. There's self-hypnosis as a practice. And I started having spiritual experiences. And that was kind of that was really how my journey began.
Wow.
Being a nerd at computer camp and seeing this idea that it started for me with the power of the mind, that there's some capacity that's really, because like again, this person was like in between two beds, but they were able to be stiff as a board. And
Wow.
that just really, um so that's where it began for me. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
Yeah.
then where did you proceed? Just for the people to know your background more or less from
Sure. Sure,
there
sure.
on. Where did you proceed to?
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I then got kind of slowly but surely more and more interested in spiritual things. And then in college, I had the very good fortune to take a class in Asian religions. Like many people, I'm from the United States. Sure, I'd heard of other religions, but if you said the R word, like I was very turned off by religion, right? But this, I heard of these other religions, but didn't know much about them. But I took this class in Asian religions, and my mind was just blown about the phenomena of religion is much vaster than what I had encountered. And so that really launched me. And I heard about the idea of enlightenment, and I was just possessed. I was literally possessed. And then began that was in my roughly when I was 20, and that really started a journey of wanting enlightenment, not knowing what this thing called enlightenment was, but wanting it. Like, that sounds cool, being at one with everything. And also a journey of healing. I'd had some very painful things happen in my childhood, and I had a very painful breakup when I was 18 that I didn't know how deeply it had impacted me, but began a journey of of seeking enlightenment, seeking healing, and then also seeking healing from addictions. At a certain point, I started to cope with my pain through addictive behaviors.
Mm.
So and from there, I've really explored a lot of different things. And um, but for me, what a lot of my life journey has come down to is uh, finding following my passions, my inspirations, my creative side, and also I this kind of very reflective, uh, almost, we had a participant talking at the beginning of how they're kind of living a bit like a nun, and I have that in me, kind of a very reflective inward, and so trying to find the integration of those
Mm-hmm.
two parts of me has been a big part of my journey. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Arthur, so now let's get to this main subject of 12 steps and how to. I just want to give you a little bit of a background. So we have lots of people who come from fasting and healing background.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
After you give us the background about the 12 steps, for example, if you could suggest some application in terms of person having food cravings, food addiction,
Yes.
other addictions, maybe alcohol
Mm-hmm.
addiction, maybe unwanted thought patterns, etc. So
Mm-hmm.
how those tools might be applied towards those particular kinds of circumstances.
Happy to do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, once again, I am really excited, delighted to be here. and partially because, so we're gonna, yes, we're gonna talk about, or I and Will, we're gonna talk about cravings and even addiction, and we're gonna be talking about something much larger than that, and that is how to be guided in life. And so the 12 steps uh, were created as a means of recovering from addiction. And they had their genesis and origin in a group that wasn't focused on addiction, called the Oxford Group. The Oxford Group was a Christian based group that was based around the idea that it, you must live your religion, not just go to church on Sundays, but really live it. And very specifically, that it's possible to be guided by a higher power. And that that is actually the natural way to live. To live, uh, you know, of course, they would say be guided by God or know the will of God and do the will of God. But from a more spiritual, we can then translate some of those ideas into the spiritual idea of living based on intuition, living based on guidance, living in the flow, or allowing your higher self to guide you. In essence, to live a life that's guided. And so that's I will talk about addiction, and but that's the thing that really fires me up is sharing with people how to access intuition and guidance and be guided, how to live I call it the inspired life, where you're filled with energy and then you're guided throughout your day. Um, so do. And so let me hop in then to a little bit of exactly what the 12 steps. So that's a little bit of the background. So what are the 12 steps? Um, they're a step for doing that. There are 12 distinct steps for learning how to live that way. And so before I hop into the first step, I think that there's a step that kind of got left out. It was kind of there in, oh, so, okay. I get really excited on this topic. I'm gonna take a deep breath, come into the present moment. So the 12 steps are a spiritual discipline. Most people, when they hear the word 12 steps, they think about groups. And it's true, there are many, many different groups, some of them for alcohol, some of them for drug addiction, some of them for codependence. But I would like to distinguish between the spiritual practice and the different groups that have formed around this practice. Because a lot of people honestly get turned off by the 12-step groups. And it's very sad to me. And the 12-step group, the message you hear in the 12-step groups oftentimes is very different from the actual 12 steps. Um, so, um, so yeah, I just want to name that what we're going to be talking about today isn't so much any particular group, but the spiritual practice that's at the root of these groups. So, so before we get to step one, I want to talk about step zero, which which isn't kind of in the book, or isn't talked about so much. And step zero is this idea of what is addiction. And there's many different definitions, many different social, even scientific definitions of what addiction is. And so I'm not going to try and solve that. And even the scientific definition keeps changing. But in the early days of the 12-step movement, they had a very interesting contribution to the conversation. They said, well, you can think of it in kind of three layers. The first layer is someone who is doing a harmful behavior, and they recognize that it's harmful, and they're mostly able to stop without too much trouble. So that really isn't an addiction per se. It's someone with a problem that they're able to easily address. The second level is what they called a hard drinker or a hard addict. This is someone who it's really become kind of a part of them, kind of a way of life. And they really won't stop unless life demands it. For example, a husband or wife says, look, if you don't stop drinking, smoking, using porn, I'm going to leave. Or the doctor says, this is killing you. You have to stop. And the people who are in this, have this level of addiction, they are able to stop, though maybe not perfectly. And it's difficult, even with such a stern consequences. But they're able to use their willpower, again, not perfectly, and moderate or stop. Now, the third class is the people that the early 12 steps were focused on. These are people who were literally out of control, people for whom willpower had failed completely. And it's very hard to fathom this unless you've experienced it. And I'll give you an example from someone I know. This person has severe pornography addiction, like to the point where they stopped working and they became homeless from their addiction. And someone gave them a second chance. It's like, look, you can stay with me, you can borrow my car, but you're going to have to get on your feet again. And the person was like, okay, I've got to stop this. I can't do this anymore. And so he started to get back on his feet and lined up a job interview. And a few hours before the job interview, without even thinking about it, he got online and someone at this level, they can't do just a little bit. Once they start, they literally lose control. And again, it's very hard to fathom um, for someone who's not experienced it. And so these are the people who the original 12 step were designed for. People who honestly were out of options and in a certain way were actually a little bit insane from their addiction. Um, so that brings us to step one. And so the reason why I shared about these three levels of addiction is step one doesn't apply to everyone. The first step is admitted we were powerless over blank, fill in the blank, whatever the addiction is, whether it be alcohol or drugs or some kind of sexual addiction. That doesn't apply to everyone. And so this first step in some ways isn't for everyone. It's for the people who have literally lost control and cannot stop, who in essence are killing themselves, and the consequences are not sufficient to stop them. And so other than that first step, everything else I'm going to talk about today is applicable to everyone else. The first step is really for the chronic out of control addicts. And if you are one such person, what I'd like to say is there absolutely is hope, because I was one of those people, um, and there absolutely is hope for that level of addiction. So then the next step is came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. So the idea here, and this is again a little bit connected to the people who are out of control, but it does apply to all of us. The question is, are you open to the idea that there is a higher power that can actually guide, that can actually make your life better? Again, this was, created for people who had literally lost control of their lives. So we can name that, but then for most of the people here probably aren't in that case. So we can rewrite it a little bit and ask, are you open to the possibility that there is a force or a power or a consciousness that can literally guide you and help you in every aspect of your life? And so that then takes us to the third step, which is turned our will and our life over to the care of God as we understood him. Now, I don't like that they have it written him, or even that they have the word God. That was because of the things I had been taught about God. I was very uncomfortable with that word. But there's a strong tradition within the 12 steps that each person gets to define this higher power for themselves. So even if you don't even believe in any kind of higher power, you're welcome to define it as wisdom, as the 90% of your brain that you don't use. You can define this higher power, anything that's higher, and let's say you could call it your ego, your habits, um, and then are you willing to literally seek out, in essence, seek that counsel of this higher power as you define it in every area of your life? Now, I've been doing this for a while, and I can say I fall short every day. It's not like I take it's not like my goal is to take every decision to higher power, but I'm a human being, and of course I fall short. But that's the goal, or that's the vision, to literally, as I said, live an inspired life. So that's kind of they call those the first three steps are kind of the foundation. You could almost say the theoretical foundation for what we're doing of making a decision, making a decision. I want to live, um, I want to live a guided, inspired life. For people who have, and I'm talking in very broad terms right now, because there's some people here who maybe have a very clear sense of a higher power, or maybe have they're comfortable with the word God. And there's some people, like when I showed up at the 12 steps, I was an agnostic. I didn't really believe in a higher power. And that's part of the beauty of the program is it seeks to meet people where they are and actually lead them through certain steps to where they can actually have an experience of a higher power, which was the case for me. Um, So that takes us, that's kind of the theoretical foundation. Now it gets much more practical. So the next couple of steps are about cleaning up the past. So if you've accepted that maybe there's a higher power, or if you already believe that there's a higher power, the question is, well, why is my life such a mess? Why am I not experiencing guidance? Why am I not living an inspired life? Well, the 12-step model offers this idea of, well, there's stuff blocking the signal, and you need to remove the things that are getting in the way. And so the next couple steps are all about that. Of making step 4 is made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves, like literally bringing to awareness um, our bad habits, our negative habitual things that we do that interfere with life, um, becoming aware of what they call in 12 step, they call them defects of character, such as jealousy or just any habit, any deep-seated habit that interferes with life, and bringing them to mind. And one of the beautiful things that they discovered was that fear and resentment were two of the biggies, two of the things that really cut us off from the higher power. And at the end, I will share more about how they teach people to deal with fear and resentment. First, I'll give an overview. Um, so then, having discovered these sort of negative qualities that are interfering with life and interfering with that connection with higher power, then there's the idea of sharing them. First of all, being honest with yourself, then being honest with another person, which is very humbling, to literally make a list of your shortcomings and share them. And then also being honest with this higher power of like, hey, these are the places and ways in which I've fallen short. And then asking that higher power's help in overcoming and even removing some of those blockages. And then the next two steps are about making amends. Because the other thing that, see, so the pioneers of this program, um, their lives kind of depended on discovering how to stay connected to a higher power, right? And so they, in this interesting way, these people who were brought so low in their life, like they knew what ego is. and they were able to identify what some of the main characteristics of ego. And the next one they identified is guilt. Like it hurts when you hurt someone else. And if you hurt someone else and you don't make up for it, that feeling lingers. And so they encourage people very strongly to literally seek out the people that you had hurt and apologize and seek to make amends. Apologizing when you'd acted unwell, um, making up, if you owed someone money, to pay them money, literally to go back to the people you had hurt and try to make it right. It's a very radical process. And for myself, I can say it's been very healing to, in essence, complete the past. It's one thing to complete it in your mind and be like, well, I forgive myself, or I was doing the best I can. And that's an important part of it. But to literally seek out people and say, you know what? I messed up here. I was wrong. Um, it's very, very humbling, not necessarily in a bad sense of the word, in the sense of coming to terms with the fact that we're all imperfect humans and we all fall short. So that's considered the cleanup phase of the process. And now we get into the part that I'm really excited about, which is the living an inspired life. And and so I'm going to actually skip over to step 11, and we'll come back to step 10 in a moment. So step 11 is how to seek guidance. So the first thing that they suggest is, in the morning, first thing you do when you wake up, you go, okay, higher power, again, you can call it whatever you will. What am I supposed to do today? And you literally take notes of every idea that comes and not censoring any of them. You'll come back later and check on them, but literally starting your day with, like, okay, you're the boss, metaphorically. What should I do today? And taking notes, and then you sift through it later on. Um, and starting your day with this idea of, I'm going to follow you today. Again, you get to define that higher power, whether it be your heart, higher self, or God. But in essence, that um, you're wiser than me. I'm going to follow. What would you have me do? And then throughout the day, whenever you feel lost or confused, to literally stop for a moment and tune in and ask for guidance, which is very radical, because that's normally the last thing any of us want to do when we're feeling flustered. There's like, oh, I got to figure it out. What do I do? Da, da, da. That, what they say that's the moment when you actually pause and be like, okay, higher power, what's next? And if you still don't receive guidance, then that brings us back to step 10, which is how to remove the little mini blocks that arise throughout the day, and to be mindful of yourself. So the idea of the 12 steps is clean up the past so you can stay connected to the divine, to higher power, be guided to do service and to help others and to live the life that you're meant to live, and then what to do with blocks as they come up, and to be mindful of, like, oh, I'm feeling disconnected from myself. I'm feeling disconnected from higher power. It's time to pause and address that. And then that takes us to step 12, which is seeking to live these ideas. Like, everything I'm talking about is a little abstract and philosophical, but to then, day by day, moment by moment, to tune in and ask, like, okay, what's the next step? Okay, higher power, what would you have me do? Oh, I'm not feeling so good. There's a block in the connection. How can and there are specific remedies, which that'll be maybe the final thing I'll talk about, um, to to even be aware, like, oh, I'm having some pretty intense feelings right now. I'm feeling disconnected from myself and higher power. I need to reestablish that connection. Um, So that's kind of the vision and the goal of the 12 steps. And interestingly enough, the 12 steps were created to deal with an addiction, but this idea of addiction being lifted is almost considered obviously a very important, but a side effect of living this spiritual way of life, of cleaning up your past and then giving you a compass for how to live in the present. Get connected to higher power, seek the guidance or inspiration of that, and be mindful when you're feeling, as they say, out of the flow, um, and then how to address some of those, how to address, remove those blocks, and come back into connection with higher power. And that's why the 12 steps are called a path of surrender, a path of following, or uh, this path of seeking higher wisdom or higher guidance. And
Arthur,
I, yeah,
maybe we should because you gave lots of information. Maybe some people have questions
that's
in relation to what you have just said. But first, I had a question. If you could, on the practical level, could you give you examples of how you apply how those principles can be applied for a person who does have an addiction, or but
mm,
also for the person who doesn't, because most of the people here, I don't think they really have strong addictions, you know. But
yes, 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 yes.
how can they apply those principles just to upgrade their spiritual life or to feel better with themselves? So how
Beautiful.
could that? Mhm.
Well, first of all, we were on the same page because I was just feeling like, oh, it's time for questions. I was like,
Amazing.
oh, lots of information, time for questions. So we're on the same page. So for someone who doesn't have severe addictions, they can hop right into steps 10, 11, and 12. And um, and then I'll get to cravings in a minute. But first, but I would say before that, and I will get to the cravings, is to really sit with this idea of how do I make decisions? And am I open to making decisions in a new way? Am I open to the idea that my life can be guided? And because it comes down to it becomes a way of life. That becomes a way of life. So dealing with cravings, um, you know, some of within the 12 steps, one of the things they talk about is the power of service and the power of turning your attention to who you can help. Um, so and this is something I do on it. I'm not haven't had cravings in it's been a while. They pop up every now and then. But when I do have cravings, the first thing I do is I say, higher power help. Like that's just become part of my, training. Next thing I do is I check in. Like what's behind the craving? What is the fear or the resentment, or did I do something that didn't feel good? Because cravings tend to not appear out of nowhere. There's almost always something driving them. And this goes to what the 10th step, continue to take a continued moral inventory. That's a very fancy way of saying continue to check in with yourself. Cravings, yes, cravings can just be like, you're walking down the street and you see something that reminds you of a craving. But oftentimes, see, people don't just do addictive behavior for no reason. It's normally to cope with pain. So if you want to not indulge in the addictive behavior, what needs to happen, or I don't say need to, but one idea to explore is to see what's driving the craving. Like, does something not feel well? I'll give you an example. Um, uh, Recently, someone reached out to me and sent me a Facebook message that just didn't feel good, and I was kind of just sitting with it. I kind of made peace with it, but in the background, there was a little like, how do I respond? And until I came to a clear solution, I didn't have so much cravings, but I started to have these little thoughts of doing the addictive behavior. And then when I became aware of that, I noticed, oh, you know what? It's because, and when I paused and tuned in, it's like, you know, I just don't feel good about this interaction, and I don't know how to respond. So that's one really uh, one very important strategy. And another strategy is just to shift your attention. As I said, service is like a great way to do that. Like, who can I help right now? But another way can be as simple as you know, going and washing the dishes. Like, cravings don't last forever.
Mhm.
So those are two pieces of wisdom. Well, hopefully they're wisdom. Two ideas that I've used, and I know that other people have and have found beneficial to deal with cravings.
Amazing. Arthur, so you mentioned this message from this person that they didn't feel well, and then it kind of created some kind of charge. Yeah,
Stress. Yeah.
some kind of stress now, and so then you applied. So then what happened? How did you deal with that? So then you kind of applied to higher power, yeah. And
And part of it was awareness of like I said, just kind of tuning into myself, like, okay, what's going on? Why do I not feel well? And so it's all, whether you're, and whether you have an addiction or not, there is this idea of and I'm looking for the words how to communicate it, a vision of a way of life. So let me backtrack and then connect it to this vision I've talked about. The vision is this: being connected to a higher power, and then being guided by a higher power, and staying aware of yourself and noticing when you feel disconnect, and when you feel out of the flow, and when you feel unwell. Then when, and again, it's an awareness practice. I'm not sitting here saying I've mastered it,
mhm,
but through a lot of time of practice. And I picked up my phone and just started doing some random, like, you know, random internet surfing. And I'm like, wait a minute, why am I doing this?
mhm.
And I was like, aha, that's when I tuned in and felt it. I'm like, you know what? I just don't feel good about this interaction, and I don't know how to respond. Um, so that's and then so that's kind of the tool. But
Okay,
then
but
again, there's
Arthur,
this.
but I just wanted to ask. So from that point, when you realize, for example, it happens to me a
Mhm.
lot as well. Like just I find myself avoiding something by
Uh-huh.
browsing the internet,
Sure,
like
sure.
kind of purposeless browsing and stuff like that. So then I can look at myself. Wow, I'm avoiding this pain right now. Now,
Yes,
if I want to apply these 12 steps
got it.
principles here, what do I do at that point?
Got it. Good. Uh, Kind of two things. First is deal with the feelings, and then seek guidance. And then as some
Mm,
not go into addictive behaviors, but to, so yeah, I did, and how you deal with those feelings, part of it is asking a higher power for help, but part of it's emotional intelligence, and each one of us is going to be is wired a little differently. You know, for me, self-compassion is, let's see, it says my internet connection is unstable. Can you
yeah,
still, oh, there we
yes,
go. Okay, I'm
you
back.
had
Okay,
there was a little break for a few
good.
seconds, but then now it's fine. It's fine again
Yes.
now.
So dealing with the feelings, and for me, self-compassion is kind of one of my, prayer and self-compassion and journaling are the way I deal with feelings. That's not necessarily something specific to the 12 step. That's just what works for me. Um, so once I was able to deal with, so first is awareness, which again comes back to this vision of being mindful. Am I connected or not? Then coping with the disconnect, with the block. Then once I felt reconnected and more centered, then seeking guidance. And the way I um and there's different people receive guidance in different ways. For me, I do writing, and I can actually, and maybe I'll share about that. But maybe take some questions or see. But
Yes, yes,
yep, yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Okay, guy. Yeah.
So
So and then
does
you,
that address what you were asking?
yeah, yeah. So basically, but when you say to deal with the pain or with the painful emotions. So that's how you deal. So you deal with your painful emotions by writing, by what you have just said, right?
Yep.
By
Yeah, my go-tos are journaling, self-compassion, and prayer.
okay, okay.
Yep. And then I mean I have a whole hierarchy of things I do, but those are my go-tos.
I see. I see.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
we
yeah.
will discuss it. Okay, guys. So
Yeah.
do you have any more questions?
Do you hear me?
Yes, yes, Soma.
Yes.
Arthur,
Yes.
I just wanted to thank you so much.
Hmm.
I don't have any question because, well, I don't. You explained it nicely, everything, and I like your voice a lot. And you give a very humble impression. So I just wanted to thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm very touched by that. And humility is kind of the cornerstone of the 12 steps and this way of life, right? Like it takes humility to be like, okay, higher power, you're wiser than me. And then, at that point in my journey when I was powerless over the addictive behaviors, it takes humility to be like, you know what, this is a problem that was bigger than me. So I try and I fall short so often. To have humility is really the foundation of my life. So I'm very touched that you picked up on that. Thank you.
It's very obvious.
No.
You can hear it immediately in your voice that you are genuine. Yeah. And just a word of encouragement, like if there is some nervous energy or anything like this, you can just drop it because you are very genuine. So you give the impression of reality.
Absolutely,
Thank
yes.
you.
I agree. I agree. And that's what I also felt from Arthur when I spoke to him. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank
Arthur,
you.
so yeah, so let's think together because I will give you a few examples, a few items that might be really relevant for people here, and then we can think together how we can apply those principles to those situations. For example, it's a fasting group, right? So a person wants to fast, but we have had people who just couldn't do that even for 24 hours. They could not abstain from food. They kind of it's difficult for them. So, but on the practical level, it means that you decide to fast, and then a few hours go by, and you have this really strong temptation by food, and then you eat. So because that's how it works. If person cannot fast. So, for example, other kind of problems that people might encounter here is that they want to change their dietary choices. For example, to go towards more in the direction of raw foods or vegan or vegetarian or whatever. Each one, we don't have agenda here, but I just give you a few situations. And but they fall back to their old food patterns. So because the temptations are too strong. So in those two circumstances, how can those principles be applied?
Beautiful. Let me sit with that for 1 minute. So it's interesting. I'm just going to share from my own personal experience. So I've had quite this journey with eating healthy, eating not healthy, and I was a compulsive overeater. That was one of my addictions. I'm very grateful that's not. But I just recently had it's a little embarrassing, but I think this will really answer your question. I just recently had a health challenge where I had to have the most restrictive diet of my life. I cannot even tell you, I was basically eating less than a meal every day for weeks on end. It was really intense.
Wow.
And then I made it through that. And then I was like, well, whoopee, I'm gonna go eat whatever I want. And I didn't get too bad, but it started, yes, it was exciting to be able to eat whatever I wanted, but it started to not feel good. And and then at a certain point, I'm like, you know what, this is interfering with my desire to be of service and my desire to grow. So this isn't necessarily something from the 12 steps, but my life, having walked this path, my life is, again, I'm no saint, but my life is, I try to base my life around service and spiritual growth. And I'm like, you know what, this is interfering with that. And as soon as I connected to that, as soon as I connected to my values, I'm like, oh, okay, you know what, I'm going to make this change. And it was pretty effortless. So the 12 steps themselves, again, they offer this vision of connected to higher power, guided way of life that's of service. But very specifically for me, the way that I make changes in my life is I connect to my values, the things that matter to me. And when I do that, then I'm able to notice how bad behaviors are interfering with those things. In essence, what we're talking about is motivation. Yeah. So that would be my maybe non-12 step answer to that question. And let me see, you talked about changing diet and the other, I've become through experience, I've become a big believer in prayer. So the 12 steps are based on the idea that, and the Oxford group, that not only that we're not meant to do life on our own, both not just in terms of having community, but the vision that's offered is what I've been talking about is actually natural, to live in communion with this higher power and be guided by it. So I would, to anyone who's struggling, I would offer the idea of simply asking for help, which goes back to humility, to ask your higher power, like, hey, I really want to make these changes. I need some help to do this. And if it's a repetitive pattern, like someone tries again and again and again and again, is unable, this is where the 12 steps might really come in, is going back to the first step and being like, higher power, I can't do this on my own, right? Like that's humility. And the paradox of humility is humility can actually open very wide doors. It's a little paradoxical, but that would be, those are some thoughts, that are connected to the 12 steps and not so connected to the 12 steps for how to deal with cravings. And actually, there's one more that I would add. So again, I've painted this vision, connected to higher power, following guidance, dealing with blocks. So part of the understanding within the 12 steps is bumps are going to happen. Life has challenges. We're going to have big feelings, and having a strategy in place, each person might have a different strategy that works for them, but actually anticipating, hey, feelings are going to come up. And and this is more Buddhist than 12 step, though 12 step is very much into it. In 12 step, they call it dealing with life on life's terms. That life built into life, and here I'm going to philosophize for a moment. Feel free to disagree with me. My view, based on my life experience and based on Buddhist philosophy, is challenge, suffering, and struggle is it's a part of life. And to accept that, and then to accept that can really decrease the struggle. Because if we have the idea life shouldn't be hard, and then when something hard comes your way, or I shouldn't have to deal with temptation, I shouldn't have to struggle to make these changes, those thoughts can really interfere and sabotage. And those kind of thoughts are just not in tune with reality as I understand it. Yep. So there's a few answers that hopefully are helpful.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Yep.
Guys, do you have any more questions?
Yes, I do.
Absolutely.
Arthur, it's so interesting to listen to you because you are humble, as you say. It's so obvious. I'm just curious, have you ever felt like the higher power that you summon and pray to is in essence part of yourself, or is it a distinctly different source of energy?
I love the question. So that's such a deep question. And I hesitate because again, I don't want to preach. This is just my own belief. I follow an Indian philosophy called qualified non-duality, which says that the divine, the source of all that is, and my soul are simultaneously at one and in deep communion, yet there is a distinction. So that's my very short answer to a very deep question is one yet distinct. And I know Soma, well, I don't want to give away, but I'll just tell you the person who said that was someone named Chaitanya Mahaprabhuji, an Indian philosopher. You can check them out. So I'm not saying that's the truth, but I'm saying that's the philosophy that makes the most sense to me and works for me.
Thank you, Arthur. And I couldn't agree with you more that Achintya Beda Abeda Tattva is the truth.
She speaks my language. Okay. That's amazing, Soma. I mean, it's very interesting. It's very interesting the direction this is turned, because that philosophy is very similar to the 12 steps. That Indian, and so this idea of surrender to a higher power is actually universal. You'll find it in every world religion. In Buddhism, it's phrased a little differently, but there is the idea of surrendering your ego. They just don't focus on the idea of higher power. But the philosophical school that Soma just mentioned is really kind of the Hindu version of the 12 steps. It's based on surrender to God, service to God, actually identifying your defects of character. I forget the word they use. And yes, so I'm delighted that most people have never heard of that. So it's very delightful to meet you and that we have that similar philosophy.
Yeah, I find the doctrine of simultaneous oneness and difference to be so exquisite, so sublime, because that means that, yes, we are the born in ignorance, you can say, person going through trials and tribulation. Yes, we are like victims in the world, yes, but who are we really? Like we can start really to feel that we are not only that, but we are something much greater, and that is so different from what we are taught in many other schools of thought.
I can't believe this is happening right now. This is so much fun. I just love what you said about this idea of, yes, I am an individual having this experience, and yes, sometimes it's gut-wrenchingly painful.
Yeah.
And is that the full story?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take away from our life as humans that we are actually much more than humans. I will not say the word God because it's so used in vain many times.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that we can be with ourselves, we can sit with ourselves and feel our human weaknesses, and at the same time know that for a fact, oh, it's just a theater. Oh, oh, I am experiencing this from a very, peaceful point of view inside of me. And then all of a sudden, it's not a matter so much anymore about praying to a distinct higher power, but more like, okay, I am the higher power. I am just going through like Maya. This is the stage. I am just a witness. So that's why I have also studied many doctrines, and the thing I always come back to is this Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva, the simultaneous oneness and difference, inconceivable but true.
Wow.
Amazing.
And what you said just so resonates for me, this idea of maybe putting aside the more theological, but getting very practical of me as individual is not meant to try and face life with just me as individual. You talked about expanded awareness, and you talked about expanded awareness. A religious person might say more, me and God. You're talking about more of a connected, but however you language it, this idea of living life with a spiritual awareness as being essential.
Yes.
However you define it.
Yes.
Yep.
And the magic, adventurous life we have, if we are fortunate enough to live a long life, is that we can go from mechanical sadhana, as we say, practice like mantra meditation and, adhering to certain rules and regulations. We can do that for some years. And then as we practice more and more, we all of a sudden do it automatically because we are in love. Like it becomes spontaneous, not like we even have to put the alarm anymore. We automatically wake up early because we are inspired. Yeah. So it becomes spontaneous. So even growing older, I can say from experience, it's so much, how to say, fun in a way. It just gets better because like it's sweeter. It's like fermented food, it's full of richness. To become older, it's good.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, guys, let's see if we have any more questions from the people. Guys, do you have any more questions? I wanted to ask you, Arthur, about also applying 12 steps to reestablish the connection with the higher power, because because when a person finds themselves in the state when they have problems and worries and something unexpected happens, oftentimes the last thing that you remember at that time is to address the higher power because you're overwhelmed. So how do you deal in your life with these kind of situations, and how to make this breakthrough through all those mental charges and just towards the higher power?
Well, I'll tell you 3 easy steps and you can be free of all suffering forever. So that's how I used to think. So there's 2 answers to this. Well, I won't say 2 answers, but in my experience, so this was a place where I personally found a little lacking in the 12-step philosophy. People who have lived it for a while have wisdom to share on how to do this. But if you actually like sort of read the literature, there's actually a book kind of that there are books that kind of guide you through the 12 steps. This part I feel is maybe one of the more neglected topics, because in essence what you're talking about is like how to cope when you're not connected. There's the goal to be connected, and there are some things you can, but what happens if you do those things and you still aren't able to find that connection again? You still don't feel well. And so it's actually with Buddhist philosophy, I actually started to spend some time in a group called Dharma Recovery, which is a Buddhist inspired approach to addiction recovery. And there I found some of the answers, some of the pieces. And so the foundation of Buddhist philosophy is that life is fraught with, the word is dukkha, but it can be translated as discomfort, suffering. I don't think suffering is the most action, but discomfort, sometimes small, sometimes huge. And a lot of Buddhist philosophy is based on how to ultimately be free of all suffering. But when you're not, which is called enlightenment or nirvana in the Buddhist view, but what to do when you're not there, when you're not fully free. Very practical things, such as have compassion for yourself, such as witness the feelings instead of reacting to them, such as detaching, not pushing away the feelings, but actually just sitting in the feelings and observing them. So that was a big piece of the puzzle that I didn't find in the 12-step literature and wasn't so talked about. And actually, for anyone, I would like to throw out an invitation to anyone who is trying to fast or trying to change their diet but not able to. I'd love to invite you to come to a Dharma recovery meeting. You'd be very welcome there. And there, so, every meeting has a meditation in it. And some of these Buddhist ideas, which are very not esoteric, like observing your feelings, creating some space between you and your feelings, accepting that discomfort is a part of life. Some of those things were the kind of the missing piece for me. So
yeah. And I just want to add that oftentimes when you do that, when you start observing, then something opens and you do get connected to the higher power or higher guidance. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's also and then there's this strength that comes, like we talked about how coping with pain through like internet surfing or but there's this strength that comes of not doing that, of being able to just be with the feelings. And sometimes a negative feeling, can last for a second, a minute, an hour, a day, and to just notice, accept, have compassion for yourself, but not react to the feeling and not let that feeling drive the show. These are topics that I've gotten the Buddhist approach filled in some of the missing pieces for me.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, guys, do you have any more questions? Okay, now, okay, then I will ask you something. So if a person wants to apply those 12 steps, but then they understand that they need to really also learn this missing link of the observation, because that's super important. Observing your thoughts, your sensations, feelings, etc. So how should they start? What would you recommend them for the beginning? Yeah, because like
Thank you.
because I'll tell you, like, in my opinion, that's the basic of everything. Like, because I try to practice every day these observational meditations where I just sit.
Mm.
I start with my breathing, observe sensation of breathing, then doing
Mm.
body scan. You know, when the emotion comes, I try just to observe them without reacting. So when that's, it is kind of a muscle that should be practiced by every living person, in my opinion, because it gives you lots of freedom and lots of power, lots of freedom of thought when you become less dependent, less reactive,
Less
uh,
reactive. Yes.
less reactive, exactly. But a person who is not familiar with those concepts, so where should they start, in your opinion?
Beautiful. So again, I'll throw out this idea of Dharma recovery. It's a great resource. It is based on Buddhist principles, but it's very down to earth. The other, for me, see, I actually had done some of that, quite a bit actually, but I didn't have the fundamental Buddhist ideas that life is fraught with dukkha, that everything's impermanent. That's another powerful idea. Is like, no matter how bad this feeling is, it's not eternal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my mind is telling me it's going to last forever. But so some of their so the practice that you're talking about is very powerful. And for me, to get some of that Buddhist philosophy, uh, was just a game changer. I had unrealistic expectations of life, basically. So that's and of course there are, all around the world, there are the groups that are called Vipassana groups that teach the very practice that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So and then for the 12 steps, I actually want to name a couple books that people could look into if they're,
Mm-hmm.
a great way to, there's a book called, Back to the Basics of Recovery by Wally P. And that leads people through the 12 steps. It's very practical in that way. It's not quite a workbook, but it's just a set of instruction manuals. This is the basic, book from alcohol. It's just called Alcoholics Anonymous. It's also known as the Big Book. The only trick with this is it's not so step by step, but a lot of the instructions are found in here, for how to do the 12 steps. And of course, you can attend 12-step meetings and ask someone to guide you through it. And I don't want to turn this into an infomercial, but I offer that as a service, and I'll provide my contact info at the end,
Mm-hmm.
to teach people how to live a surrendered or a higher power guided life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Amazing, amazing, Arthur. And I also wanted to ask you about the initial steps from those 12 steps when a person
Mhm.
admits that they cannot do it by themselves, that they actually seek.
Mhm.
Now, a person might kind of realize it intellectually, but on the practical level, because of the ego,
Mhm.
because of our Western conditioning, it might be really difficult to kind of give control to give control to something else or someone else. So
Yeah.
if a person finds themselves with this particular problem, what would you recommend?
Um, well, I can speak from experience here because I intellectually realized the value of, like, hey, God's infinite and infinitely wise. I'm not. Like, intellectual, the logic of it, you know, like, makes sense to me, but the humility. um, so part of it is, you know, for me, part of it was just getting pounded to the pavement by addiction, of just trying and trying and trying and not being able to do it on my own. That's part of, and then the other part is, watching how much better my life was when I lived by these principles. And, like, you know what? when I, to the best of my ability, when I put divine guidance first, night and day, you can't even compare my life when I'm living this way and when I'm not. So that was, that's part of it. And that's a place where going to meetings can be helpful, and listening to other people's stories and being like, you know what, I am effing sick and tired of this habit, behavior, addiction. Here's someone saying that they have found a way out. Not only have they found a way out, but their life is like 10 times better. That's a place where meetings can benefit, where you can hear someone who was as low as you or even lower, and then they're doing well. And you're like, I want that. Yeah.
Yeah,
And that
absolutely.
many people say the first step is the hardest step, because for the very reasons you said, humility is not it's
Yeah.
not an easy thing. I struggle with it every day. Not as bad as I used to, but humility is yeah.
Yes, Arthur. But then again, you know, like I can understand that the person who has particular addiction, they can go to the meetings of the people with with that particular addiction. But a person who just lives kind of normal life, like who don't have people who don't have severe
Yes.
addictions, they need to, okay, they, as I understood,
I see your question. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah. I
so
misunderstood. Yep.
they have to apply it by themselves, or maybe it was my misunderstanding. So could you please clarify
That's
that?
okay. Heard, understood. So here's the place where the answer is going to be similar, where other people are helpful. A mentor or a spiritual or religious person who lives this way, because um, I talked about kind of being pounded down into the pavement, but what you're talking about is someone who maybe their life is okay. So how to get to this point of like, and so talking to someone, see, in Eastern philosophy, particularly Hinduism and Buddhism, they there is this idea that spirituality is not a do-it-yourself process. Like community and teacher and elders, like are a necessary part of the process until they're not. It's not like you have to do that forever. But here in the West, and I'm sure it's not perfect in the East, but we do have this I can do it all mentality. So that's a place where community and some guidance can really be helpful, and also some inspiration, right? Of um, like even knowing that there's something, because until I read this book and until I talked to people who were like, yeah, this is how I live. Like I didn't even conceive it was possible to be guided by a higher power, right? So does that help? Does that help
Yeah, yes,
address?
yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and today, in addition to that, today we also have YouTube with lots of people who talk, who tell their
Truth.
stories. So
Yes.
so today all this inspirational part becomes easier because of the social media, YouTube and other things, because of the internet. Okay, Arthur, and tell me, please. So when you say when you feel that you are guided by higher power, how does it express itself? Does it express itself as intuition, or you kind of hear if you could point out what exactly is happening there when you know that now I'm guided by a higher power.
Great. It shows up different ways. Um, sometimes it's just a natural feeling. For example, I love what happened earlier. I'm like, that was a lot of talking. Okay, time for questions. And then you said that.
Wow.
So the idea is it's not always like the clouds part, you know.
Right.
It can be simply a thought or a feeling, and an impulse. Of course, you need to check and feel in. Like you might have a thought like, okay, time to go do this. And then you just like, does that feel right? Yes. Sometimes it can be a song that just randomly plays through your head. But I think for me, where it feels most is where I have a feeling where I just feel it's like I can settle into something. For example, I was trying to feel into, and I was doing some journaling and praying on how to respond to this message that didn't feel good. And finally an idea came, and I was just like, oh, like I could just kind of relax into that. So it shows up differently. Some people do hear an actual voice that offers guidance. That's not generally my way, but I've definitely met people who, but more for me, it's more of a feeling, or I'll just have a feeling, an impulse, or a thought. The idea is you get connected, and then your impulses, thoughts, and feelings tend to be directed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Super inspiring. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, do you have any more questions? Because we are going to wrap it up soon, but please unmute yourself and ask any question you want. Okay, so it looks like we don't have any more questions. So Arthur, I'm going to ask you soon about the services that you provide and a little bit like that. But we also had it's pretty unrelated to that, but someone wanted to know what your dietary choices are during this period of time. You remember I passed this question to you on WhatsApp.
Yeah. I thought about it, and so my response to that is my go-to view on diet is Ayurvedic, which actually Soma will like. The Indian approach to, and part of why I like it is it really honors the idea that one person's poison is another person's medicine. So someone with my body type, according to Ayurveda, should not eat spicy foods. But there's another body type where spicy foods, that for me, that would not literally be poison, but be harmful. But there's another body type in which spices are helpful. So for my body type, things that are sweet are considered soothing, nourishing, and helpful. Literally the taste of sweet. Whereas for that same body type where spices are considered healthy, sweet things are considered unhealthy. So what I love is it meets the person where they are.
Wow.
So that would be my, that's, I'm a big fan of raw foods, but my body type in Ayurveda is not considered the best. So I love raw foods, and but my fundamental view on food it's deeply informed by Ayurveda. So
wonderful. Yeah. Actually, we have one of our group members, or maybe few, but at least one that comes to my mind. She is very experienced Ayurvedic practitioner, and we had few webinars with her about doshas, about different aspects of each dosha.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Okay, guys, so do you have any more questions at this point? That's your last opportunity for today to ask Arthur questions. Let's give it 1 or 2 seconds.
Hello.
Hey, Revital.
I started talking about types of personalities in food, and that interests me. I mean, could you speak about what types of personality, what types of food suits them, or is it another topic altogether?
It's another topic, but I can give you the 1-minute version. How about that?
Yeah. Okay.
Ayurveda says there's 3 basic body types, and I love that you said personality, because each of the body types does have different personality types associated with it. Kapha tends to be a larger body type, and so for Kapha, I don't have them memorized because I'm not Kapha, but spicy, astringent, and I forget the third one. The second type, kapha, and the second type is pitta, which is fire. Kapha is phlegm or fat. Doesn't mean the person is fat, but so fire, sweet, a sweet. I'm sorry, I don't have them memorized, so I don't want to do disservice. I have vata memorized because I work with vata a lot. Sweet, sour, and no, not astringent. And see, I don't even have them memorized. So I'm the wrong person to ask. That's we'll have the Ayurveda person come back. How about that?
Vitali, you can scroll back. We had this webinar with Hetal. I think she went into details about each body type.
I was so excited to impress everyone with my vast array of knowledge, and I have my strengths and I have my I just kind of live Ayurveda. I don't really know it anymore. I'm just like, oh, that food yes, that food no. Oh, my fire is a little high, so I'm going to stay clear of that one. And but
So you're the fire type?
Fire and wind. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, and I also want to tell you that we are planning few webinars with Arthur, not like week after week, but maybe a few weeks later. We have lots of interesting subjects to discuss, so it's not the last time that we are seeing each other. And Arthur, so towards the end, please tell us about different services that you can provide that might be helpful
Sure.
to our group members and other people who watch it on YouTube. So please tell
Wow.
us a little bit. Yeah.
Happy to. I provide a variety of spiritual services, teaching people about meditation, helping them learn how to tap into guidance, walking people through the 12-step process. Two of my deep passions are helping people integrate Kundalini. For some of you, maybe some people have never heard that word, but Kundalini is an energy that in Eastern philosophy, they talk about lies dormant at the base of the spine. And once it awakens, it's actually very connected to this topic. Once Kundalini awakens, surrender is really necessary. It really, I believe we're all on a growth path, but when Kundalini awakens, it's like, it kind of fires things up a bit. And so I love helping people, and it can be very intense. So I love helping people integrate and learn how to live that way, and also helping people with various types of unbalanced spirituality. I'll say quote spirituality, and even cults. I was involved in some cults when I was younger, and what I found is not everything that is called spiritual is true or helpful. And some things that are marketed as spiritual are actually very unhelpful. So I help people recover from various spiritual topics philosophies, practices that actually took them on a downward path in which they are finding it hard to extricate themselves from.
Amazing. Amazing. Yeah, Arthur. And I also read that you offer just general healing. Yeah, like energy healing.
Thank you. Yes, I do. And that's the webinar we're talking about is, so there's this idea, and again, it's cross culture, cross tradition, that there is, and we started today with the meditation, that there is an energy that we can tap into that can actually heal. And so I teach people how to receive it for themselves, and then I also do that practice with them for them. So,
wow,
yeah,
amazing. Okay, guys, so we'll put Arthur's contact details below this video. Please feel free to contact him, and if you have any more any additional questions, you can always post them in the group, and then they will be passed to Arthur. We will address them. So, and Arthur, thank you so much. Thank you, really, I really enjoyed, and yeah, and really, so that's the direction I want to take those meetings. You know, to really talk about the deep subjects about spirituality, little bit, you know, because usually we have webinars like about cleansing and fasting, but I really want to take it even deeper than that. And actually, because of that, I really enjoyed this webinar with you, Arthur. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
So
I want to give a shout. I want to give a shout out to Soma. It was really fun to bump into someone with who knew this obscure philosophy that I'm really into. Thank you for saying that and speaking up.
I can only say it's a mutual feeling. Thank you so much, Arthur.
Okay, guys. So thank you so much, everyone, and we will keep in touch. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.